The Snapshots Music and Arts Foundation presents a conversation with Tabitha Soren on her history at MTV. Part 2.
My observation with the vagaries of MTV programming and what they decided to push had everything to do with the audience. They were so tuned in to what the audience wanted that it was completely ratings driven. But anytime I complain about how, I thought unintelligent the footage was and how, watching people party and wear these terrible bikinis and I just thought it brought out the worst in people. That they would just point to the ratings and say that, well, the audience really loves it, and so we get really high ratings, and it pays for other things that don't. Basically, some of my work that's more serious in nature, and there you go. So it's a business like everything else, and I had to be reminded of that occasionally. But what was popular pop music was not necessarily my favorite music, and again, it's so subjective what your musical tastes are. I was happy being in the news department because they would, every so often, they would let me do a news story on an artist that wasn't on the charts. Somebody, maybe on the college radio charts, or somebody who was a little offbeat, or had a long career but was never going to be popular in a Britney Spears sort of way. And so the news department had a little more freedom in that. The programming, the music programming, had to be completely tied to what was on the radio and what the big record companies were promoting. And, there were all these other considerations that the news department really just stayed out of.
It seems ironic in hindsight that the industry itself didn't create its own MTV or a cable news station for music programming, because all of that is of course gone, including Tower Records and all the other components that were part of the grid of the industry at that time.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I felt like it was audience-led. Tower Records thing came much later, and that has to do with downloading music instead of buying it at a record store. So that's a little bit of a different subject. But MTV kind of gave up music programming long before that. I would say it's kind of nice not having people ask me all the time now. People have just gotten used to it. I remember when they were, why don't they play any videos anymore? Or even, if they just didn't like the music that was being played, I'd get in an elevator and somebody would want to, ask me why their favorite band wasn't on MTV enough, and it was so nice to be able to say, I'm not in talent artist relations. I have nothing to do with music programming. I'm as dissatisfied as you are. They don't listen to me. I do my best.
It's kind of hard for a music fan to find a home these days.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Tabitha, you were able to experience a peak period, certainly in the music business. How would you contrast the climate of the 90s to what we've experienced and have come to today?
I think that it's not really an industry anymore. Everyone who's trying to make a living within the music industry is finding it harder and harder to do so. I think they're all trying to come up with some sort of internet-related way to get music out there. I think the musicians are trying to figure out ways to make money through touring and merchandising, which is always a big money maker, but now it's even more so. I don't think most people expect to make much money from their CDs, and certainly it's much more do-it-yourself in terms of the recording process. You don't have big budgets for producers coming in and long, big amounts for studio time. Maybe Mariah Carey does, but I think actual rock bands are not in that situation.
How did you transition into photography from working as a journalist for quite some time?
Photography had always been something I was interested in, but I had never formally studied it. I took pictures constantly growing up because I moved from town or base to base every 3 to 4 years, and really I relied on snapshots for memories, more so, everybody does to an extent, but more so than someone who grew up in the same house their entire lives. So my relationship with photography went from that to being at the Oval Office or being backstage in a Rolling Stones concert or, being in these places where everyone was taking pictures. And I felt like, well, hey, this must be something I'll want to show my grandkids, and I'll take pictures of me and President Clinton or, that sort of thing. And then actually at MTV, a lot of people, I went to some photo shoots where people were taking my picture. Annie Leibovitz took my picture, Stephen Meisel took my picture, and so being on the other side of the camera also exposed me to process that I hadn't seen firsthand before. So all of that piqued my interest in studying at Stanford. Once I took one photography class, I just ended up taking them all, and they ended up giving me a key to the dark room because I was always there anyway, or bothering them to let me in, and I just fell in love all over again. I work much more in fine art now than I do in editorial, but I do have some photo editors who know my pictures, know what my works look like, know the sort of feel and atmosphere that I create in my work, and then they sort of hire me to shoot the way I shoot. I don't really work that much with editorial people who need the work to look perfectly in their magazine, that need it their style, if you will. For lack of a better word. So it's not like I'm taking, 5 assignments a week or anything. It's taken 10 years or so to, figure out what my point of view is, my voice, just like a writer. It takes a while for you to learn how to make your pictures look like your pictures and not someone else's.
What do you think the state of journalism is?
I think it'd be really exciting. There's so many ways to express yourself. And I feel like analysis of the news is much more widespread now. With publications, you can't even call them publications, I suppose, but magazines like Slate and Salon, where they really, a frustration in hard news is always, and to keep our opinion out of it, you try to be objective. I think almost to a fault, it almost dulls it down a little bit, because anything sort of clever or wise could be kind of making a judgment on whatever the material was, and that's one thing you wanted to stay away from. So I felt like some of my best lines in writing or some of our best footage ended up on the cutting room floor as a result, because it just was sort of too biased in a very traditional way. But I feel like journalists have come around to thinking that's kind of dull-minded. It must be a much more fun landscape to be in. There's so many choices, you don't have to try to be everything that all people also.
MTV, any final thoughts or reflections on your time there?
I think it was a really exciting way to spend your 20s. I worked nonstop. Anytime I got tired of interviewing old white men who had a loose relationship with the truth in Washington, D.C., MTV would see the glazed over look in my eyes and send me on a bus with the Black Crows for a week. So it was a really nice way to get recharged, to go back and forth between pop culture and politics. And it's two things I really felt passionately about as I was growing up. Certainly those kind of international politics were something that was just part of the fabric of my family life and as a kid, and it was nice to be able to turn them into a vocation. That's what everybody wants, right? You want a job that absorbs who you are in your soul, and I felt very lucky that I was able to do that.
Thank you for listening.